Hey everyone, I've got some GSL qualifier replays to cast. We actually got every single one of the, determining matches, I suppose we could call them that. The ones that actually determined whether or not someone got in. So, got both the winners and losers, and both chances, both rounds, I guess is what they called them. So, we do have, for this particular first best of three, a match from the round one Group A brackets. Not really a group, but, you know, kind of be used either way. Anywho, and the winners match as well. So, now that we got all that cleared up, it means that whoever wins this actually does get into GSL Code S for Season 3 of 2023, which obviously everyone wants to do here. Most of the players who signed up in the qualifiers are recognizable professionals, or perhaps a little more semi-pro, maybe, but basically people you recognize, although there were a couple of people you did not. None of them really made it so far. Spoiler alert, the people who made it far are the ones that you would typically see in GSL, or people who actually have come back. So that's why I thought this would be an interesting cast. In the bottom right, coming back from military service a little bit ago, it is once again Stats. And in the top left, who came back from military service years ago at this point, it is herO, who has the more established returnee, or whatever you want to call it. Definitely the favorite to win this, but Stats, definitely a talented StarCraft 2 player, and a style that doesn't necessarily get old, I suppose. Probably can adapt and come back into StarCraft 2 rather quickly. So he's going to struggle against, again, the established pros, especially those who have at times been the favorite to actually win GSL, which herO was at least a couple of times the favorite to win at GSL. Or almost favorite. I guess Maro's always the favorite to win. But anyway, you know, he's up there. But herO, not as much of that player nowadays, has been in a little bit of a slump. Can't quite get that magic that he got upon about 6 months into his return from military. And kind of got settled, then he got really good, and then he got really freaking good, as well as helped develop a couple of metas, and then just kind of fell off quite a bit actually after Katowice earlier this year. But enough about the history of these players, because this opener is already kind of good fun. We have a Zealot coming out from herO across the map, actually did build it and finish it, and that's going to distract Stats Zealot, who was made because they're both blocking each other's naturals. They both went for a low ground expansion on Babylon thanks to that high ground situation the natural has, which is not uncommon, but because of the way that they both have tried to deny each other those nexus, it's become a very uncommon game. We have herO successfully denying Stats' nexus, with the pylon actually still up, and Stats still having to deal with now a stalker from herO racing across the map. herO, unfortunately, not able to get any pylon and shield battery up and running, which would have really caused some complications. We have seen that from the likes of Max Pact before, for instance. But without the shield battery, I don't know if herO's single gate aggression can actually really do as much damage as you would hope, but it's actually kind of already. Haven't even discussed the fact that herO just said, whatever, man, I don't even care about getting that natural, and grabbed this third base. That is very unusual. He's not actually using it quite yet, although we do have some probes being produced, but the damage that is actually being done from herO is not so much direct, I suppose. You know, it's not a bunch of probes going down. And it wasn't a lot of units going down until now. An Adept has already fallen. This Adept as well also going to fall alongside Stats' Stalker. herO lost one Stalker, barely saved the second, but a shield battery from Stats should be able to save the day until that warp gate is done. Finally finishes up in the nick of time. And all it takes is one Stalker warping to go ahead and stop herO from starting to poke at that shield battery, which would have been the really disturbing thing to have happen there. This has been, as I said, a very uncommon opener because of their insistence on denying each other's expansions. Well, a combination of their insistence on denying, because that is common, but then the counter insistence on still getting the Nexus. That would be, I guess, what makes this such a unique opener, is that usually if it really is, like, if you've been pylon blocks or an X-Core block, harass in the early game, you know, you might actually even opt to go for an all-in, or you certainly opt to go for, like, a Stargates before you actually get your economy up and running, just because you were kind of forced to. Another player actually did that, both of them investing as much as they possibly can into, again, both of their one-gate expands, so why herO couldn't really snowball right there. But then they did add on some technology. I guess Stats did add on a Swelly comes for his Nexus. That's actually, I mean, there's so much going on, I didn't actually catch it. But it's not a Stargate. It's not that Stargate that kind of can catch your opponent by surprise, although not in this case. Hero would have a shield battery. Stats would actually not have. It's not for the harassment or the scouting potential that Stargate also gives you. Also defensive potential as well. No, Stats actually opted for a Twilight Council, which is going to give him superior blink timing. And Hero's not even going to try and go for blink. Okay, there we go. For 1 second, he went for charge. I was like, no, blink it is. So, Stats' blink is going to be much faster. Theoretically, you could use this to control the map and then actually take a faster third nexus. As far as the timing of their nexus, it was awfully weird. Again, very weird opener because Hero took his as his third. He's got a lot of lost mining time in the transfer of his probes. And then he did stop producing probes for a little bit. So, even though Stats is also at his own awkward moments, he was, well, behind by 5 probes. I'll make that 6. Thanks to the Adept's getting in there. But if he gets a faster third nexus, then he might actually be able to get ahead. But then I just realized that if he can't pressure Hero's outward third, which is actually his second base, he's not going to have much better luck attacking his third base, which is actually his natural. This is one of those weird situations that can happen where it's like, you know, if you take the outward bases, you're supposed to be more vulnerable to some early and mid-game attacks. But then if you aren't, if nothing happens in such a way that your third base gets up and running with a shield battery and a saturated probe line and the army supplies are pretty similar, your natural is one of the safest third bases you could possibly get. So this is actually really throwing a wrench into things. Stats' punishment on Hero's lack of mobility, a lack of blink, doesn't really become a punishment in this game. It doesn't become a boon to Stats in the opposite way either. He doesn't really gain that map control because Hero kind of, you know, risked it faster and then was rewarded for it. And Stats just did not have a timing to actually take down Hero, even with that blink finishing so much faster. Hero's blink is now done. He's also got 2 immortals compared to Stats' 1. Handful of sentries for Stats and perhaps a shield battery that is pretty well placed. That is actually a very good placement there. It's going to help him defend his main and his natural, but is it going to actually be enough? Third and natural, sorry, excuse me. Force Field's actually cut off Stats' immortal from the rest of the crowd, taking that out. Meanwhile, Hero's 2 immortals still up and running. I don't know how important that observer is to kill, but that shield battery did a great job actually keeping it alive. Second immortal from Stats did pop out, but once again is under the gun, under fire here, and it's going to go down. And it looks like Hero's attack into Stats is going to win him the game. I mean, with a shield battery and a relatively close army supply, it was definitely up in the air, but Stats' first immortal being taken out of the equation so damn quickly thanks to a couple of good force fields that they really changed the dynamic of the next, 15 seconds of that battle. Basically turned it from probably a winnable, might not be the right word, but a holdable battle to a losing battle, and now Stats is going to probably lose with the follow-up. Hero still has more workers, which he's always had. He's always had that benefit. So that did give him a little bit of a boost in his army, even though his blink was a little bit later. He had to catch up on that. And then now, as it still holds to a better economy, he should just be able to actually get better upgrades, more warp-ins, and take more chances, which with Hero usually means aggressive chances. With Stats, it's usually defensive. We do actually have a very, pretty much the perfect Protoss players to showcase both styles. And it's happening. It has happened this entire game. As weird as the opener was, at the end of the day, Hero was the aggressive one and Stats was the defensive one. It just got a little weirder with the dynamic of PvP. Hero's starting to warp in Adepts to really complicate matters, blinking into the guy's main and natural, just getting all over place. And Stats is having some trouble dealing with it. It's not the killing blow. This is like tenderizing the meat before you actually slice it up or cook it or whatever you want to do. Hero is just testing the water, seeing what he can find, and then meanwhile grabs a Nexus, Templar Archives, charge, and +1. Stats is not so far behind on those upgrades, but he's definitely behind on the Templar Archives, something that is going to be problematic for the next engagement because Hero's going to have as many Zealots as he would like, and Stats is not going to have a super great way to deal with them unless he has a couple of Archons. Now, if he can get literally 2 Archons, especially around a shield battery, then that's actually pretty powerful against a lot of Zealots. Hello. Well, I can tell you that was a mistake. Hero rallying an Immortal for some reason all the way across the map. Obviously, the Observer, I guess, was rallied, but then it's more like, I'm actually surprised he's continuing to make Immortals. Usually after this that fight we just saw, that kind of timing, it's like, okay, we're done with Immortals. Stalker, Charge Lot, Archon, all right. But no, he really wanted 2 Immortals, and since that second one died, he had to replace it, so now he's back up to 2. Matches Stats' number of Immortals. Stats still does not have charge, about, what, 30 seconds away from finishing, and herO is ready to go once more. He's got an Archon already. Stats still not actually warping in an Archon, realizes he absolutely needs to. Gets those high tempos warped in at the last second, just barely had the gas. And 1 Archon is not as good as 2, but it is something, especially with 3 shield batteries and an overcharge to try and save the day. SimCity also might work in his favor. I mean, he's blocked off Adept Shades and Charge Lots being able to run in. Ditto on the natural. Adepts could still run in, of course, but they're kind of past that point in which the Adepts are trying to be clever. This is more about just mashing the action figures together and going, you know, go for it. herO, again, taking this stance while also expanding means that he will soon be up 2 bases to his opponent, again, inevitably winning the game unless he really throws. And herO has been overly aggressive, no doubt about that. Once again, moving into the shield battery position that barely saved Stats' life last time. Chooses to be a rather poor choice, perhaps, as the supplies, well, I guess, you know, they were getting closer, but they weren't necessarily favoring Stats. He does blink forward, take out the Warp Prism, a very ambitious move from the Blue Protoss, but it might have actually been totally correct. He takes down the reinforcements, and herO is forced to evacuate. Stats does take the army supply lead as well, realizing he had an advantage even though he was behind an upgrade. He had moved away from his shield batteries, which were a lot of out of juice anyway. And obviously blinking in kind of just blinks into Immortal Fire and Charge Lot swipes. But it worked out. His Stalkers actually majority saved themselves in that blink forward. There wasn't as much punishment for that. Oh, that's a little awkward. And just realizing that herO did overextend. And snapping back as soon as it was apparent he could. Definitely got that eagle eye from his professional days, which he's hoping to come back into. That's a very astute observation. herO definitely a little more aggressive than he perhaps had to be. Could have waited out Stats' attempt to grab a 4th base, instead moved into the 3rd of the shield batteries, and now Stats realizing this is his only time to possibly win this game. Goes for the immediate counterattack. He does have a decent amount of Archons on the front lines. 3 Immortals picking away on herO's majority Stalker army. Shield battery also now in trouble, is gonna go down, and the Immortal might be microed here, but the Zealots nowhere to be seen for herO, are not here to buffer. 3 Immortals are having the time of their life. The probes hardly the buffer that's herO really wanted, but there is a return jump on the Warp Prism, and that was really all it was for Stats, all he had. He knew that was the only time to counterattack, and while it looked promising at the beginning, towards the end, it was clear that herO's army supply was just way too good. I mean, the line of Stalkers against 3 Immortals still up and running really makes you sweat. The timing of the upgrades had also just barely worked out for that counterattack. Stats was absolutely correct to call for the all-in right there. He was not going to win this game 3 bases to 5, and inevitably would have fallen even if herO did occasionally make too aggressive of movements. But counterattack wouldn't do it. But that was some really, like, that was astute play from Stats, actually. That was the confidence that was really on the mark, as well as the, of course, macro and micro that goes along with it. It's just that herO had gotten himself into too good of a position. GG's. herO will take game number 1. In the top left of Gresfon, up 1 now. He is DKZ's herO. In the bottom right, we do have Stats. I guess has not rejoined a team. Also to note, guys, they do not play with the mod attached to their custom lobby. This is not as official, moderated admin type situation as the actual GSL, in which someone makes the lobby and then makes sure the correct mod is on and so on and so forth. So without that mod, going into the replay, we were not going to have access to the graphs, like income and army size, and we're not going to have access to the little pop-ups for the upgrade timings or for the worker kills, which, to be honest, the worker kill is pretty much the most important thing. Something that if they do ever make a StarCraft 3, which seems very unlikely, they should probably just put it in as default. But then again, hopefully they put in the entire freaking thing as default. If they had to choose one feature that's definitely a crutch nowadays, it's that worker pop-up kills. You have no idea how tough it was back in the day in the wild, wild west, having to count, pay attention to the mineral lines at all times. Pshaw. Seriously, tons of games missed, you know, probably 4 probe kills, you know, often in the early days, you would miss straight up massacres of the probe line, SCV line, whatever it was. And then only after the guy tapped out, we were like, oh, because his entire mineral line is gone. Oh, gotcha. That thing was a real game changer. But overlays used to be much worse as well. You can check out one of my StarCraft history videos for that. Now we have this nice, pretty clean... This is WSS 3.0. I've always thought Game Heart was the best, but then it didn't get put in default, so I always just got lazy about it. But I can tell you what isn't the best. And that's that 2020 thing, man. That's the freaking arrows, which now we have to use because it's the only one that has space for a team logo. Hate the arrows. Anywho, definitely not talking about the game right now. Let's get into what is happening in game number 2, whether or not stats can bring this back. Now, again, I tried to summarize... What happened there? I heard a cancel? Wait, I totally missed it. I was trying to summarize where they are in the GSL qualifiers. This is round 1, and this is the winner's bracket. So stats actually can fall down to the loser's bracket and still qualify, or herO can if he ends up losing the next 2 games. And then they also, I think, would have had a second chance in round 2. So multiple chances to get into the GSL. Trying to avoid as much, like, you know, bracket shenanigan stuff as possible. Some of you might already know who actually makes it through and are just, you know, interested on seeing exactly how it happened, and that's totally fair. The results are public as soon as it is finished, and for the longest time, you would absolutely never get access to these qualifiers. 100% never. Then you had some people allowed to cover them, like No Regret was able to cover them live in Korea for a little bit, and then I think, like, Alpha X, maybe, got some permission to do the replay casting, so post-qualifier. And then, obviously, now have the Patreon, which I don't believe they gave the qualifiers for the past 2 seasons, actually. I was kind of surprised to see my email that the qualifier replays were released. So, either I missed it for the last 2 seasons, or they just realized they weren't doing it and were like, well, why not? Which, I'm, you know, very thankful for. So it has been a macro game. We have some very basic openers, stalkers, and sentries, the basic defensive scouting units that you would want if your ideal situation is getting onto that 2-base setup. And then I would say in this type of game, a 2-base setup will often lead into a 3rd base. There's a little bit of scuffling around whether or not the 3rd can be taken as fast as your opponents. A little bit of timing down to the blink timing. If there is a 15-second difference, someone bold and brave uses that 15-second advantage to go ahead and jump on top of the 3rd Nexus building. That's when things can snowball and we get a little bit more of a clear picture as to who's actually going to come out ahead. But despite the amount of considerations made in the early game PvP, even when things seem to be going normal, there's usually a lot of, like, possible hesitations because you're considering so many things that could be happening. So you don't usually get PvPs in which both players are neck and neck on the probe count, army counts, blink timing, and 3rd Nexus timing. Usually there's some advantage somewhere, and for this, turns out that herO has a slight advantage on the probe. A little farther behind on the Nexus. Oh, actually way farther behind. He opts to go for 2 gateways, so you can obviously change it up. It's just that a lot of times if you do have this very typical setup, it kind of goes into a natural 3rd base setup as well. And herO could have done that. I would say there's actually a greater chance that a Protoss in this position would have opted for the faster 3rd Nexus to tie up the stats. But there's always that chance, I don't know, 30% chance that they actually have the gateways on first. And herO is known as an aggressive Protoss, no doubt about that. So maybe you increase that to 40%. But one of the reasons why this wouldn't actually be all that common is that you still have hallucinations going across. And you've really determined, you know, the line of thought from your opponent with all these hallucinations to almost a T. I mean, you almost know exactly what they want to do. Not quite exactly, but in this case, Stats absolutely was on the money. He knew that it was typically a typical game, and then the 3rd base was missing, so he made sure to get that shield battery up and running, made sure to be paying attention to his army, that aggressive blink forward, not really paying off there for herO, who thought he might just have that man advantage, which he does have 2 more stalkers, but ends up not really working out. Still combating the power of a shield battery is going to be difficult. Second shield battery on the way. Again, stats constantly hallucinating. Saw those 2 extra gateways. Probably even figures there's a proxy gateway coming up. This is a common maneuver when this happens. And knows to be defensive. And what is stats known for being good at? Defensive, but herO's also known for being good at being aggressive. So let's see if he actually gets this done. Again, coming in with that stalker lead, but up against 2 shield batteries. He's trying to single target down each individual stalker, but he can only do that for so long. He is also bleeding off his own units and now can't really one-shot the stalkers anymore. And as such, is forced to retreat, but back into reinforcements we go. More aggression here from herO. He never stops, man, but the shield batteries are out of juice, and the overcharge is also done with. So this actually might have been a good opportunity, but still so many units for stats left over, and an Immortal backing this all up. The Immortal really being the linchpin to the defense, because if herO had warped in these 5 additional stalkers and there was no Immortal, no overcharge, and limited shield battery energy, there is a very solid chance that he would have won with this. But the Immortal is really the difference. But the Immortal is away from the shield battery. It didn't actually get regen there. Huge mistake from stats, trying to take an aggressive stance on the high ground, take away that high ground vision, or abuse the high ground rather, that herO would not have seen until he blinked forward. But I don't know about that. That was too far away. A big mistake, and stats still on the ropes here, down in army supply. His actual army supply also consisting of not very impressive units. The sentries are tickle beams at this point. Don't even have a guardian shield to contribute. Down to 2 stalkers. A zealot trying to get warped in. Not quite the one-shots, actually one-shotting the sentries at this point. And so the Immortal will go ahead and survive. Get a couple of shots itself. Unfortunately, that zealot here from herO did pop its barrier. So again, it's about that next battle. The next battle is very suspect. herO also, behind all this aggression, was able to saturate all 3 of his bases. So he's been even ahead in probes. But he's not able to quite kill stats here. The zealot's actually causing some problems, not being one-shot. They're tanking so much of the damage, and the 2 Immortals are alive. Well, we're alive. One goes down, the one that lost its shield. This one no longer with a shield either, but finally able to back into that shield batteries, and the overcharge not going to be able to save it, but it got probably 5 or 6 extra shots there. Big difference maker as herO Stalker is now obviously in less numbers, but also injured. But once again, that shield battery overcharge going to dissipate. Stats now without an Immortal, just the Stalkers that he has. It's a desperate battle for survival. Stats also has to consider the macro complications afterward as he has fallen behind on the economy. Not that he knows that quite yet. He has not been able to get any scouting across the map, but he does know that his opponent had proxied a gateway. He had gone for more gateways, and it's possible that his opponent also cut probes. So stats actually might be thinking that if he just survives, he can be good. If he just survives, it's very playable. And I would say that it actually is. Like, because herO has 4 extra workers, there's a little more doubt, but herO is missing a very important upgrade. +1, never started for herO, only in the last 20 seconds, and so stats is already working on +2. That's a huge difference maker. And even though the probe count has been consistently better for herO and even getting better as I speak, I mean, it's not necessarily going to run over the guy who has that defensive setup, who has the benefit of the upgrades, and who has managed to sneak in a 4th Nexus during this entire time. If he can actually defend that, then stats is going to be in a wonderful position. herO is supposed to contain this guy a little bit stronger, a little bit harder, a little bit longer, and the fact that the 4th Nexus is actually getting finished as herO is finally forced to retreat away from his proxy gateway is actually a really bad sign for herO. This 15 worker lead, had he stopped stats from getting an expansion, would have been absolutely his ticket to win. But now herO also being caught being a little over aggressive once again, trying to save his position on the map, inadvertently runs into a stronger stats army, again also with that +1 upgrade advantage, and now is really forced to retreat. Can his additional worker economy actually make up for all the things that stats has? Double the army counts and an additional upgrade? I don't think so. herO has kind of, I mean, let the ball drop a little bit. It's definitely more complicated than just like, ah, you fool, I can't believe you didn't do this. But yeah, that aggression maybe should have turned into another contain, which worked out for him well in the last game. And then a contain for another, you know, even 120 seconds here would have put stats into a similar all-in position as the last game. Instead, herO caught being maybe again overly aggressive, certainly around defending that dead gateway at that point. He was not supposed to be able to save that. He lost even more army supply trying to, and then not actually stopping his 4th base from mining. Tried warping a couple of depths, didn't really work out. herO will try and hold on to this economic lead. 5th base coming down here, but he still has yet to make up for the army supply deficit. He's also, I think, clearly read the situation as unfavorable to him. Dark Shrine coming up. It's not that this is Dark Shrine when behind desperation to kind of time to take the big risk, because he is on 4-base saturation. You can afford to go for a Dark Shrine. And if he is going to play the kind of more mass expansion, higher probe count, mass gateway army, then, this does come along with it. But I would say that he has identified that he does not have a strong enough army. He needed to buy time, first with the Adept Warp-ins, then the Zealot charges, and then DTs. And he just hasn't actually bought that time. Not to mention he's being found entirely out of position. Stats just going through the middle of the map, finding 2 Immortals all by their lonesome. Easy kill on that one. And herO is actually going to go for the base trade. That's really the only option. He has warped in the DTs, and his Stalkers are entering into the main base of Stats, take down all those pylons, all that production. herO, though, can't actually win the main fight. There is nothing here that is going to help him win the main fight. He'll be down an upgrade and down 40 army supplies, so it's all about the actual base trade. Stats, however, still with a lot of probes and a lot of minerals in the bank, could actually be replacing his buildings as we're speaking. The probes seen by herO actually with some of his reinforcements coming in. He knows that if Stats has enough minerals to build a Nexus, that he's probably still screwed, and there is that 1 Nexus. He could build 2 more. And herO will eventually figure that one out as he kills not just the main Nexus, but also that 4th base Nexus. And he's going to go, okay, shoot, that's not great. That's not good for me. herO is trying to also use his own bank that he had accrued in the beginning of that battle, the base trade, to actually build a lot of static defense. That 4th base is a goner, but if it takes down like an Archon, for instance, that would be pretty considerable. 5th base is also going to be a goner if the full might of Stats' army can actually bear down upon it, which it does seem to be doing. They have cleared out herO's main base entirely, establishing not just a Nexus, but additional gateways at herO's natural, which is now Stats' natural, I guess. And that base needs to be not just protected by cannons and shield batteries, but also by herO's army. Then he might have a chance if Stats is overly aggressive. Is that would actually be what he has to do now to actually throw this game. He would have to just be way too confident, move into the shield battery overcharge and mass cannons and the herO army, and die. Because, he could probably move in, realize he's making a mistake, and pull out, and still actually be fine. It'd be total overconfidence that would actually kill Stats here. And that's just not his bag, man. That's just actually not what he's known for. herO, even at his absolute best performance, will still have moments where you just acknowledge that was over-aggressive. You're like, yeah, that wasn't it. You probably could have done this instead and been a little better off. But sometimes it also makes games much easier for him to win, of course. He's very, very lethal. Stats, definitely on the side of almost never overly aggressive, but does occasionally let leads go. I mean, it's double-edged sword, right? Like, very rarely do you have a Protoss so in their prime that they're 100% making those decisions correctly. Always as aggressive as they should be, always as defensive as they should be. But one thing is for sure between these two guys, Stats is going to play the more defensive style, and that works absolutely perfectly for his position. It would only be some type of different character that he has as a person that would force him to throw this away, in my opinion. I haven't forgotten about the Dark Templars. There are 3 of them alive, running around, but there is 1 observer for Stats. I mean, that's a little concerning, but he also got a forge and a cannon up, so some forms of detection. herO does have 2 observers of his own, and I'm sure is looking to kill the 1 observer of his opponent's. DT is definitely that surprise element in base trades when it comes to Protoss. Here we go, coming in from 2 different angles. Stats actually just going to go for it. Just going to punch it. It's really only the Stalkers left defending all of these shield batteries and cannons, which is not going to be enough. herO had put his Archon up the left side, Zealots as well. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that probably wouldn't have been enough either, actually, but it was not the true final stand of herO. Stats took advantage of it. Probably would have won even if all of herO's army was there. herO's trying to expand elsewhere, got all his production up and whatnot, but herO is going to be losing this game, even as he cracks Stats' mining base, which does make things a little more complicated. Stats is running around killing all of herO's bases. This is his last base. herO cannot afford another Nexus. So as much as I want to hype this up, it's still very possible for herO. I just can't. As long as an observer is alive and herO is short on cash, he will be found out and he will be killed. Superior army from stats ensures victory in case of a head versus head battle. It also ensures victory in case they have to split up and start taking down buildings. Now he has so many more units to do so without risking their losses. You know, if he takes off all these zealots to kill the pylons, his main army still wins. We still have an observer as well. herO's DT gonna get taken out, put him down to 1. It looks like, oh, actually, you know, the last building just went down. So herO not even getting a chance at GG. Probably just, you know, shook his head and then maybe GG'd in the lobby. Very polite and actually friends these two. So stats will win game number 2. At the end being a base trade, but for the beginning and kind of middle, it was just him on the ropes the entire time. herO absolutely had a chance to win the game. But Stats was able to barely hang on, and so we head into a game 3 to determine who actually makes it into GSL, first and foremost. In the bottom left of Royal Blood, it is DKZ's herO. And in the top right, we do have Stats holding on, a shield of ire, holding on against the... I mean, we never called herO the Sword of Ire, but that, you know, probably would have been the cool WWE wrestling type of setup between the two. Is it a missed opportunity? It might be. But since it's been so long since both of them have been the top of the game at the same time, it's not really on us. It's not really on the current batch of casters, all right? The last time they both were of equal skill and both active was like 2016? I have to do some serious math here to figure this one out. But then herO went to military first and then came back first. And when he came back, Stats basically left for military. Basically, kind of how it went, I think. Approximately. But I would say that's actually kind of appropriate. The shield versus the sword. The guy who just blinky blinks on in, no fear, versus the guy who has an appropriate amount of fear. He's not afraid, he's cautious. He's not a scared driver, he's a defensive driver. There you go. But I am really quite impressed with Stats' ability to read the situation in game number 1. I know he lost it, but that was actually more impressive than game number 2 for me. The fact that he was able to identify his moment to strike after herO's aggression. And only because he had already fallen too far behind did he not win on that counterattack. That was just very smart. Really quick thinking in the heat of the moment. herO is putting out a pylon, but it doesn't actually look to be proxying anything, as his probe does move away at the last second. Stats, of course, noticing the lack of pylon. It's going to have to be suspicious. I mean, herO's probe is still chilling, so he's probably doing this because he can't afford to build his technology anyway. Oh, he had a Nexus? No. He definitely does this versus Terran, but... I was gonna say, pull away the probe, since you can't afford whatever technology you're thinking of anyway. So that if they scout your pylon, they don't scout the probe as well. And if they scout the probe with the pylon, that's an intention scout. That's like, okay, that probe's gonna do something. Stargate, Twilight Council, Dark Shrine, whatever it is. No probe, probably no proxy. Probably. I'm thinking that's what herO is doing. But herO... yeah, just actually is putting a robo back at home anyway. So there's, I mean, you know, this wasn't exactly a Stargate proxy location after all. It would not have been in proxy at all, but it could have been hidden. It could have been a Twilight Council. And indeed it was not. So this probe's just chilling. All right then, maybe he will think about getting a Nexus here. Yes, he actually will. Oh my god. So right now, Stats is looking at this and he's like, all right, you're one basing me. Like, I gotta be extra prepared here. Oh, and herO just got a scout too. That's really nice for him. Gets in, kills a probe or 2. He killed 2, and then also sees that his opponent's getting a robo. And his plan is probably going to work out now. There's... unless Stats can actually find his Nexus, which he should scout. It's not common in this matchup. It's more common from herO in PvT, but herO is definitely an abuser of Royal Blood. He does like these Nexus. Stats might be missing that type of pattern since he's not participating in all of the top tier events that herO is. Or just it's out of his brain right now, you know? It's that one time you forget, you know? Either way, it doesn't bode well for Stats, who is going to think totally defensively. And he's not going to know that something is up for a little while. You know, as far as he can tell, we still have herO building up an immortal count and getting a Warp Prism, trying to fly across the map and preparing to kill him. Now, as the seconds tick by, more and more Stats will be like, wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second. Like, what are you doing? Oh, come on! Oh! Oh, no! Okay, just check. Whew. All right, so the distraction of the Warp Prism came in almost perfectly timed. Had that been, I want to say, 5 to 10 seconds earlier, there's a chance that Stats actually goes, oh shit, he is doing it, and then pulls back his Stalkers. But it looks like his Stalkers kind of went over to be picked up by a Warp Prism anyway, so it also might have been a bit of both fortune and, you know, read. But yeah, the Nexus is now known about. The time at which Stats could have probably punished it is maybe already gone, because his choice of defense doesn't give him many opportunities against herO. There's nothing really different between the two. Now, there should be a difference of army size very soon, but maybe not enough to overcome a shield battery. So Stats is going to try and harass the base, which is definitely the best option. Had he opted for a defensive Stargate, it also would have been quite complicated, don't get me wrong. Maybe he could have tried kind of... Yeah, I think a Stargate actually might have been worse. Oracle's got the same trouble against a shield battery. Void Ray takes too long to get across the map. Yeah, so I mean, the Robo is really actually the better situation here. Stats figuring this out earlier would have been the best situation, but say Livy. And now they both are Warp Prism harassing each other because no one got Blink. No one got a Twilight Counselor, right? So do all this all the time you want. So back to my original point, which is that Stats is still kind of screwed. I mean, he has not known about his opponent's intentions. He had the default to being defensive, and so his economy is going to be much, much worse. And the hope that your army is better... Well, this is going to work out well again, actually. herO rallying another Immortal inappropriately here is going to get caught out and lose a very important unit. Are we going to do the base trade? Oh my god, we're going to do the base trade. So I was thinking that herO could actually play the defensive player, but of course he wouldn't. And then actually try and defend. In which case, a shield body overcharge would make up whatever army deficit he was in. But instead, he goes for the aggression. He goes for the pseudo base trade. Now, Stats stops the base trade by recalling here, leaves some units to harass the gold base, but he is worried about defending his home base, and he's doing actually a good job defending it. That lack of second Immortal came in probably in this battle. Another second Immortal gets rallied in super awkwardly. These Immortals from herO are not well taken care of, and Stats was able to deflect that mostly off of his own Warp Prism micro, actually. A lot of his units were caught behind force fields. So herO probably thought that was going to go a little bit better than it did, but Warp Prism micro very important, which actually Stats messed up on. Lost one of the Immortals, and the second one is not very healthy. Warp Prism also is not healthy, very dangerously low. And the Stalkers looks like they didn't kill too many probes, the ones that were left behind to harass that gold base, probably thanks to the shield battery. We once again are back on the topic of defending the cheeky gold. Can herO actually do it? It is a little more complicated because he can't use a shield battery in this situation. His probes have to pull back to stop themselves from being killed. herO seems intent to actually save the day here, save this base, but can he actually do it? He does have 4 Immortals. Somehow the guy loses like 2 Immortals and still has 4. Down to 3 thanks to the one weakened one, but this one also getting weak is going to be microed, of course, and the same cannot be said for Stats here. He just did not have the Immortal firepower, and the Warp Prism also can no longer micro. herO is going to win this battle, defend his gold base, although didn't defend too many of those probes. At the last second here, all the micro on either side ends with Stats losing more of his army. Oh, and his own misrallied Immortal. Of course, not misrallied initially, but towards the end of it, absolutely. And now Stats does have an army deficit. And his probe lead, I'm not sure, is actually all that important at this point. In fact, their mineral income is still dead even, basically. And Stats now has to deal with a much better army. That second Immortal could have come in so freaking handy here. I mean, herO still has the healthy Warp Prism, and that ultimately might have been his ticket to victory, but it would have been a little bit easier for Stats to defend if he actually had a second Immortal. Here we go, second Immortal. That could have been a third. That would have been huge. It is going to be now his lifeline as he tries to micro with this very, very, very weak Warp Prism. As those shield battery, one's about to pop up. It will go down pretty quickly afterwards, however, and Stats' last stand here is not going to work out the same way as it did in game number 2. herO's aggression will win the series. Just barely. This was a real close match. And herO even going to back away for a hot second. But he can actually continue to warp in. He's gotten probes back to mining on his gold base, and he has won this game, despite Stat's best attempt to kind of figure out how to deal with everything and all the micro and all the battles that were happening. Both made some forced errors, but for Stats, his was, I guess at the end of the day, a little more important. He was the onus was kind of on him to do something, so in a way, he kind of had to play a little bit better as the rest of the game went on, right? His earlier bamboozlement meant that he had to play the game from then on almost perfectly, and he didn't. And I gotta tell you, as far as the Warp Prism Micro 1v1 battle, I would have given it to herO, but he also had approximately 15 other units. So he's gonna win. herO wins the best of 3 and does advance into GSL Season 3, which I think we all kind of expect. Very worrisome if he did not. But he has missed out on GSL. So it still would have been a surprise if he didn't make it through, but wouldn't have been a surprise. But there's always that worry. But no, he makes it through in his first attempts. Meanwhile, Stats has to try again in the lower brackets of the first round of qualifiers.